Stretching like a narrow ribbon along the Pacific coast, the Alaska Panhandle is one of the most geographically unusual parts of the United States. Wedged between the steep mountains of British Columbia and the icy waters of the Inside Passage, this strip of land looks, at first glance, as if it should belong to Canada. In fact, on a map, it seems almost disconnected from the rest of Alaska, separated by hundreds of miles of rugged Canadian territory. Yet this coastal corridor, home to fishing towns, rainforests, and deep fjords, is American soil. The reason lies in a complex history of imperial rivalry, 19th century diplomacy, and a gold rush that changed the fate of the North. From an early 1802 treaty between Britain and Russia, to the Alaska Purchase of 1867, and finally to a heated boundary dispute in 1903, the Panhandle's story is one of political maneuvering and strategic geography. Understanding how it ended up in U.S. hands reveals not only a fascinating border tale, but also the lingering impacts of old-world empires on the map of North America today. Russian control. Before 1867, long before Alaska was part of the United States, it was the far eastern outpost of the Russian Empire. In the late 18th century, Russian explorers and traders pushed across Siberia, sailing into the North Pacific in search of valuable sea otter pelts. By the early 1802, Russian settlements dotted the Alaskan coast, and the lucrative fur trade made controlling the coastline a priority. In 1825, Russia and Britain signed the Anglo-Russian Treaty, which clearly defined the border between Russian America, Alaska, and British North America, modern-day Canada. Under this agreement, Russia was granted a coastal strip about 30 to 40 miles wide along the mainland, the area we now call the Alaska Panhandle. This arrangement gave Russia exclusive control of the coastline and blocked Britain from having direct Pacific ports in the region. Britain retained the inland territories behind this strip, which would later become part of Canada's Yukon and British Columbia. This treaty decision would become the root cause of why the Alaska Panhandle remained separate from Canada even after Russia's influence faded. U.S. purchase of Alaska. By the mid-19th century, Russia's hold on Alaska had weakened. The fur trade, once the lifeblood of its North American colony, was in decline, and the vast territory was expensive and difficult to defend, especially against potential British expansion from Canada. After losing the Crimean War to Britain and its allies in the 1852, Russia saw Alaska as a strategic liability rather than an asset. In 1867, Russia struck a deal with the United States, selling all of Russian America, including the Alaska Panhandle, for $7.2 million, a transaction now known as the Alaska Purchase. Negotiated by U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward, the deal was initially mocked by critics as Seward's folly, who saw Alaska as a frozen wasteland. What many Americans failed to realize at the time was that the purchase also secured an important stretch of Pacific coastline. The Alaska Panhandle, with its deep-water ports and control of the Inside Passage, became strategically valuable for trade, fishing, and military access. From the moment the treaty was signed, the Panhandle was officially part of U.S. territory, and Canada had no claim to it, since it had never been under British or Canadian control. Boundary dispute after the Klondike Gold Rush. For decades after the Alaska Purchase, the exact boundary between Alaska and Canada's northwest interior mattered little. The Panhandle was remote, sparsely populated, and far from the centers of trade or settlement. That changed dramatically in the late 1892 with the discovery of gold in the Yukon. The Klondike Gold Rush of 1896 to 1899 brought tens of thousands of miners and prospectors to the region. Suddenly, access to the Yukon became crucial, and the most practical routes to the goldfields ran through deep fjords like the Lynn Canal, located within the disputed part of the Panhandle. Canada, now a self-governing dominion of the British Empire, argued that the 1825 Anglo-Russian Treaty's vague wording meant the border should run inland along mountain ranges, giving Canada several of these key inlets and a direct route to the Pacific. The United States rejected this interpretation, insisting that the treaty had always intended for Russia, and now the U.S., to control the entire coastal strip, including the fjords. With tensions high, the matter was referred to an International Boundary Commission in 1903, made up of 6 members, 3 Americans, 2 Canadians, and 1 British representative. To Canada's frustration, the British members sided with the Americans, leading to a 4-2 decision in favor of the U.S. The ruling confirmed American sovereignty over virtually the entire Panhandle, leaving Canada without direct tidewater access to the Yukon. Though the decision angered many Canadians, It cemented the Alaska Panhandle's status as part of the United States. The story of the Alaska Panhandle is a clear example of how geography alone doesn't determine borders, history does. What seems like an odd cartographic quirk is actually the product of imperial rivalry, diplomatic deals, and a pivotal arbitration that favored the United States. From Russia's early claim to the coastline in 1825, to America's purchase of the territory in 1867, and finally to the 1903 boundary decision, every step locked this slender strip of land into U.S. hands. Today, the Panhandle is home to fishing communities, indigenous heritage, and some of the most breathtaking scenery in North America. Its place on the map stands as a lasting reminder that the lines dividing nations are often drawn not by nature, but by the negotiations, ambitions, and compromises of history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed exploring the geography behind this remarkable region, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. What surprised you most about one of North America's most unusual borders? See you in the next video.